Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
And that's why today I'm very pleased to cast my vote in the affirmative. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Assembly Update. I'm Assemblyman Angelo Santabarbara, representing the 111th Assembly District, which includes Montgomery County, parts of Albany County, and parts of Schenectady County. This will be the first show that we've put back online since the pandemic, and I'm very excited to welcome my first guest, William Patrick from Schenectady here. And Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Angelo. Good to be here.
And I'm excited to talk about your book, which is The Buzz Around Town. So you just recently had a book launch. The book is called Metro Fix, The Combative Comeback of a Company Town. And I know exactly what that means because my father used to work for General Electric. And that's actually what brought them here to the city of Schenectady. And this book is being talked about because it really tells a story that people have kind of been telling on their own for many years now. We saw quite the transformation that began with the downtown area in Schenectady that moved on now to other parts of the city, and hence the comeback. So I'm excited to hear about how this book came to be and what it's like to write a book. So let's start with just a little bit about the book and what it means to you to be able to write a book like this.
Okay. Well, this is my 10th book, so I'm pretty used to, writing books. This was a commission book. Neil Golub actually commissioned this book. His daughter Mona called me and said, "Hey, Bill, how busy are you? I want you to work on a memoir with my dad." So Mona and I went over and presented it to Neil, and he said, "No, I don't want to do a memoir." He said, "Nothing about me." And I said, "Well, how about Price Chopper?" He said, "Nah, worked there for 60 years, don't want to do Price Chopper." He said, "I only care about one thing, the economic revitalization of Schenectady." And I said, because this was 2017, 4 years ago, when the city was absolutely booming, right? Before COVID had hit, everything was great. And I said, "Well, Neil, that's a Village of the Happy People book. Everybody wants to live in that village because you're making it work. It's all great. But nobody wants to read a book about a happy village." I said, "You got to have conflict. You got to have the story of what happened to Schenectady. Why was it in the dumps? Why in the 70s, was Proctor's in terrible shape? Why in the 80s and 90s were so many people leaving town and being laid off? Why was the city almost bankrupt, by the year 2000? I said, if you tell the story of what happened beforehand, and then you say, how did Schenectady 2000 affect it? How did that start Metroplex? What effects did Metroplex have? Why did the revitalization happen?" I said, "That's a book I'd be interested in telling." I said, "But that's a big project." And Neil said, "Go ahead, do it."
And you said 4 years in the making, right?
Yeah, I spent 4 years on it.
You actually interviewed me for a piece of this book.
You were one of the first 6 or 7 interviews.
But I was happy to tell my story, and I think most people that are part of this city, or whether they've grew up here or are part of it now, we're happy to tell their story and what they have seen.
Yep.
What was it like interviewing? And I'm sure you heard some similarities in these interviews, but what are some of the things that maybe you heard from people that weren't exactly similar, different versions of what they think happened in Schenectady?
Well, it sort of depended on what the sector was. So if I was interviewing Chief Clifford about the police, or Greg Kaczmarek, who was a police chief back in the 90s and early 2000s, of course, we talked about the corruption in the department, how the department has changed so much recently, all that stuff. If I was talking to politicians like Gary McCarthy or a city council member, it'd be more about politics. So there wasn't a great deal of overlap there. The overlap came socially, because people all had great stories, if they were old enough, about the 50s and the 60s, and how they'd come downtown and the streets were so completely crowded that you couldn't even walk. It was that wonderful downtown. And then late 60s, early 70s, you got deindustrialization. GE, like so many other companies in so many other towns all through the Rust Belt, started to diversify, started to disseminate, started to move businesses out and away, or they just left. I mean, like Flint, Michigan, GM just left. So if you've got a company town which is based on a real major corporation, and all of a sudden 30, 40, 50,000 people are laid off, the city really suffers. And that happened here. We lost 30,000 people in about 35 years. And a lot of them didn't come back, couldn't come back. So that produced, a real problem. But back to your interview question, the cool thing about the interviews is as I was doing them over the first 2 years, I didn't know what my story was. I knew that Neil had said, I'm interested in the economic revitalization, but that's a very abstract, broad topic. And what does that mean? Where do you start? What do you include? What do you not include? Who do you talk to? And so for 2 years, I was, putting pieces together, thinking, where's this story? I got to find out what the story is here. And it took me almost actually 2.5 years to find that story. I was well into the book before I figured out what it was really about.
And what you said earlier is exactly right. The big thing, of course, General Electric. Like I said, that's where my father worked, and thousands of people in that lower Broadway area. My father would tell stories of just packed with people, couldn't get through, and suddenly that changed. And then I think the big thing that happened is to get us that brought Schenectady to where it is today is diversifying, sort of moving away from that company. That there's going to be one place where you find jobs, to there can be other things that bring us success in the city.
Yeah, I think that was a slow transition, though. I think, the 90s, 93 is when Schenectady 2000 started. It was Neil Golub, Roger Hull, George Robertson at the time. And they basically said, wow, city's in the dumps. What do we do? How do we raise morale? So they recruited volunteers. They set up committees. They had 14 different committees. And they had 800 volunteers. And they went around doing things like planting trees, changing the lighting systems, painting the railroad trestles, doing stuff to make the city look better, basically just to say, we care about this place. Downtown is almost deserted, and we've lost a lot of people, but we all still live here. We still love the city. What can we do to make it better? And that, it didn't morph exactly, but it transitioned to the beginning of Metroplex. And that's, of course, made all the difference.
And we hear that name a lot here in Schenectady because virtually every project that we see, there's some involvement with Metroplex, and it has made this community unique. We've seen projects that likely would not be possible without the involvement of Metroplex. But in recent years, I know in just the past 10 years, the downtown. Certainly a project that has changed Schenectady, but now we're seeing other parts of Schenectady that are seeing revitalization. In addition to the casino, Mohawk Harbor, this is more. I guess my question is, this is not really a history book. This is a community book. Is that how you would describe this?
It's both, though.
It's both.
Yeah. There's an epigraph near the beginning of the book, which is to understand where we're going, we have to understand where we've been. So unless you tell the history of how you got to a certain point, you really don't know, how to set your bearings for the future. And so I thought, well, I've got to really tell the story, not only GE's story, but the city's story, whether it was the arts or politics or Schenectady 2000. I've got to give people a real basis of information so they say, okay, that's what happened in the 80s or the 2000s. And so how do we build on that knowledge? How do we move from there? But you just brought up something interesting. The interview I did with you was a turning point. I didn't tell you that at the time because I didn't know it at the time. But when I said to you, Angela, who else should I talk to? You and Nicole said, oh, we've got all kinds of people. Rosa Rivera, Walter Simpkins, Will Rivas, Jamel Muhammad. You rattled off like 4 or 5 people, none of whom I knew at the time. And so I started getting in contact with them. Actually, Nicole got me in contact with people, and that changed the whole book. Because up until then, remember, this was a commissioned book, and the person who was paying me to do this book said, here's my interest. It's the economic revitalization. And so up until then, I was thinking, oh, well, movers and shakers, right? Who are the people in government, in business, wherever, who made this happen? And as I talked to Will and Jamel and Walter and Rosa, I realized, wait a minute, everybody made this happen. It wasn't just a few people. It wasn't just the leaders. It was all the people at the grassroots level, philanthropists, foundations, nonprofit organizations, neighborhood associations. All these people made it happen. And then I started seeking those people out. Pat Smith, Camille Sazanowski, all those people and thought, okay, yeah, that's the story.
And it's exciting to just hear you say that, and I'm super excited to read the book, and I think a lot of people are. And hearing you say what you just said, that it took many people from many parts of the community to make everything happen that we see today, and it is true. And you know, maybe you don't see that because you might not hear about all the work that's going on, not behind the scenes, but in communities, in neighborhoods. You may not see it. But it's definitely there. We just opened up the ice skating rink yesterday.
Yeah.
And I said in my comments that everybody's here. Everybody's here. It's not just like, okay, the ice skating people are here.
Yeah, nice.
Everybody's here from the community, and this is what brought us here, is that
Right.
everybody has a role to play in virtually everything that we do, but everything
Exactly.
that has happened as well.
Yeah. Well, downtown is so nice now. I mean, it's so impressive just in the last 8 or 9 years that it's tough. If you're from Hamilton Hill or Vale or, you know, Bellevue or, you know, you pick it, Woodlawn, you pick the neighborhood. It's hard to compete with downtown. There's so much great stuff down here and so much success downtown that never happened before, that I can see people going to Hamilton Hill and not realizing, oh, wait a minute, this is the center of the Guyanese community. And look at all these really great markets. Look at all these great restaurants, these Caribbean restaurants. And you know, pick the part of town. There's stuff happening everywhere. Boys and Girls Club with Shane Bargee. There's all this great stuff happening all over the place, and yet we don't see it because we're kind of dazzled by downtown.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I think that's shifting. I think we are looking to talk about more than just the downtown, and I think that has been the focus. And I think, you know, we're moving in sort of to the next level now of what Schenectady can become. With that question, with that comment, my next question is where do you see Schenectady going in the next 10 years? Is that part of this, or is there, or maybe you're just give us your opinion with everything you've put into this book? What do you see happening next?
Well, the last chapter, chapter 14, is titled What's Next? And so to a certain extent, it's about the future. It's very much about where we are now. And once again, I talk about a lot of those community volunteers and philanthropists and foundations in that chapter. I interviewed Annabelle Solar, actually a month after he got here, so I talk about the school system and the changes coming there. But the book ends, actually, I probably shouldn't give this away, but I spoke with Vic Abate, who was his head of global research for General Electric, and he gave me 2 interviews. He was very generous, and the first interview, he told me all the great stuff they've done. And at the end, then he had to leave, and I said, wait a minute, Vic, I didn't get to the hard questions. You got to talk to me again. So he gave me another interview, and I said, you know, what about all the stuff that caused all the trouble? What about Jack Welch and all the layoffs? What about Lemuel Boulware and the diversification and the anti-union stuff and all the stuff that was an integral part of this city? I mean, you've got Helen Carini and all the other, you know, local union members who fought like hell to make life better for minorities, women, almost everybody at GE. That's a big part of the story. What about that? And he was really good. He said, yeah, stuff that happened in the past wasn't great. We acknowledge that wasn't great. It's too bad, all the downsizing. He said, but you know what? People don't realize. Global research, we're doing incredible carbon capture work. We're doing work with Verizon on, you know, all these amazing telecommunication systems. He said, it's happening right here. We still have thousands of people here. GE is still here, even with the new news that they're breaking up. They're still here. We've still got the main campus. We've got global research. And at the end of the book, I say, you know, whatever fences needed to be mended, we should mend them. This is one of our assets. GE is one of our assets. They made the city. They're an incredible corporation that has invented damn near everything you can think of. And why don't we celebrate that?
Yeah, and that's you know, very excellent. I couldn't have put it better myself. That's excellent way to move forward. You know, what's happened has happened. We are where we are, and we do need to move forward. Everyone needs to move forward. And you're right, General Electric is still here. There are things happening on the site. We do see their name around town still. So I think going forward, that's an excellent way to look at things. But we'll see what the future brings. My next question for you on the book is, maybe you've already answered this, but what was the most surprising thing? And I think you've kind of touched on this, but was there, what would you say sort of surprised you? Wow, I didn't know that, and I think this is something that I should put in the book.
Well, there are a whole bunch of little surprises. There wasn't any big moment where I went, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. But there were a lot of amazing little things, like the Proctor's story, right? Proctor's was falling apart for over a decade. And then they had a year where they're basically showing porno films. I mean, it was just, and nobody was going to it. And the roof was falling in, pigeons were flying around the seats. I mean, all the carpets were soaked through. It was a mess. And the city condemned the building, basically. And they said, first they said they were going to demolish it. But then an arts, I can't remember the acronym right now, but there was a group of volunteers who saved Proctor's, who came together and went to the city and said, look, if we can prove to you that we can fix it up with volunteer help, will you let us buy it for very little money? And the city said, we'll give it to you for $1. If you can actually renovate that theater and put on a show, it's yours.
And this is a story that I've heard around town. I've heard this story.
And it's in the book.
Yes.
And it's an amazing story. So Dennis Madden, who became the executive director during the 80s, was part of that. Marilyn Sassy, a whole bunch of people were part of that. And it's a fascinating story. And the more I talk to people, I talked to Dennis at length, to Marilyn at length, to Philip Morris at length. And the more I talked to people, the more I thought, I can't believe you saved this place. So that was an aha moment for sure.
And you know, I've been to Proctor's many times. I bring my family there. We go shows, and you know, even though I've heard this story, hearing you say it right now, it's almost like it's hard for me to believe it right now, because you look around, you go into the theater. You know, there's a lot to Proctor's. It's not just the theater.
Yeah.
It's very hard to believe. Future City competition. You know, the engineering for the kids. The engineering competition for the kids happens here. So much goes into Proctor's that it's almost unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. Well, it was a mess at one time. There's another small little story that kind of illustrates another aha moment. And I got this from a newspaper article that I just happened on by chance. Neil Golub's father, Bill Golub, was the one who gave $1 million to Neil in 1992, right before he died, and said, you know, please do something for the city. Well, interestingly enough, when Bill Golub was a child, was an infant, he and his parents lived at the bottom of Knott Terrace, right where it met Broadway, and there were trolley tracks there in the old days. And kids used to put small little explosive caps called tornado caps on the tracks, and the trolley would roll over them, and it was like, you know, like an M180, it would blow off, and the kids would run and scream and say, hey, that was fun. So Bill Golub, as an infant, was asleep with a nanny in the bedroom that faced the street, and one of these tornado caps went off and woke the nanny up, who was asleep. When she woke up, she looked in the crib and saw that Bill Golub had turned blue and was suffocating. Don't know why, whether he aspirated or whatever, and she revived him and saved his life because of a prank outside.
Wow.
So if that had not happened, we wouldn't have had Schenectady 2000, which means we may not have gotten to Bob Farley and Neil Golub and the legislation to pass Metroplex. So just saying, sometimes little things, can make a big difference.
Well, and just doing the research on this and telling the stories, it's amazing to have this be part of this story. That is, you're right. Sometimes things go in a different direction and you don't know why.
Yeah, exactly.
Until you trace it back to sometimes a single or one event or two.
If you can find it.
If you can find it, right.
So last night I was speaking with David Harris, president of Union College, and he had read the book, and he said to me, God, I really like the book, but he said, all the way through, I kept asking myself, what was the white whale for this guy? What did you pursue that you couldn't get? And I said, boy, that's a great question. I have no idea what the answer is, right?
Yeah.
But I was thinking this morning about it, and I realized it was honesty. Because I did 135 interviews, and I would say a third of those, I could tell that people weren't being honest. For whatever reason.
Yeah.
I mean, it's human nature. You don't want to tell somebody terrible things about yourself, right? So, I mean, some of the people who were obfuscating. I could tell they were not giving me the truth. Some of them have died. 5 or 6 people I interviewed have died in the meantime. Some people have lost their jobs and left town. A few other people are here. But I kept thinking, if I push hard enough, I can get people to be honest about everything. And that was probably naive. People aren't going to be honest about everything. They're not going to tell you everything. But I wanted to do it because I wanted to have a truthful book. I wanted every single thing in it to be true. That doesn't mean I got everything fully correct, there are literally thousands of facts in here. I hope I got most of them correct.
135 interviews that can't be what you planned on.
7,000 pages of transcription.
Wow, that explains.
It's crazy, Angelo.
That explains the 4 years.
Why would you do that, right? Because then you have to read the damn thing.
Well,
once you've done it.
I think that Schenectady, from the time I've been in office, Schenectady is known now. At the Capitol. People know there are things happening here. People visit here from Albany and from other parts of the state. Certainly Proctor's, there's people from New York City that come to Proctor's.
Mohawk Harbor, the restaurants, the music scene, our jazz scene. Eighth Step is here. Holy cow.
And the list goes on. And
Yeah.
as I commented earlier this week, I believe the best is yet to come. I think there's more. I know there are other people that have new ideas that want to do more.
Lots.
And I think that will happen. Would you say that this book is inspiring to other communities, a story of inspiration?
I think we're representative. That's why I wanted company town in the title, because there are hundreds of company towns in the Rust Belt. Jersey City, Buffalo, Rochester, Flint, Michigan, Janesville, Wisconsin. The list is very long of cities that have tried to revitalize after a major corporation left. Yeah. So I think some of them have been successful, some of them have not. And so, if we're representative and our story can offer lessons to people, they should read it. Because they might say, hey, you know what, that could work for us.
It's not just a Schenectady book where you have to live in Schenectady to read it.
Exactly.
It actually represents a lot of what, like you said, this is a familiar story.
Absolutely.
That's happened to a lot of places that I've visited. They have a lot of the same challenges, a lot of the same struggles. But
also, apart from the company town aspect, deindustrialization happened all over America from the 60s to the 90s. Movement to the suburbs, spurred by the interstate highway system in the 50s, that happened all through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Cities were up against it for a long time. It wasn't just that a company laid people off. People were already leaving. They wanted to find better schools. They wanted more space. They wanted to go to other jobs. There were a whole lot of factors involved.
Well, it's been great having you, Bill. For my first show back, I couldn't have asked for a better topic. I grew up in Schenectady. I grew up in Mount Pleasant. My family came here, both immigrants, and I grew up around many of the things you are talking about. So last question, easy question. Where do we get the book?
That's easy. Metrofixbook.com, one word, metrofixbook.com is the website. Pine Ridge Industries over in Scotia is our fulfillment house. You can certainly get it from them. They get an order, they ship it out the same day. It's very fast. Okay. I have a signing tomorrow at the Open Door Bookstore. So Janet Hutchinson will be carrying the book. She's the only bookstore that's carrying the book. There are 9 Price Chopper Market 32s that carry the book. Okay. That'll be starting on Sunday. They've got I just delivered them yesterday. So the shelving displays are going up and they're going out. So that's a bunch of options.
Well, I hope people give it a read. I know my chief of staff likes to listen to it in the car. I don't know if you have an audio.
We're going to do an audio book in February.
All right.
We're going to do that. E-book in January, audio book in February.
We'll let her know that's coming so that during our many travels we can hear the book. I'm excited to get my book signed. And
by the way, before you sign off,
yeah.
Your best story is in the book.
Well, I can't wait to get to it. I'm excited. Thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate your insight and talking to us about what inspired you to write this. And I hope the viewers give it a read or maybe visit you at the Open Door Bookstore.
Thank you, Angelo.
Thank you, and thanks for watching this episode of Assembly Update. Join us again. We'll have many new guests lined up, and you can watch this on my website, www.nyassembly.gov under Assemblyman Angelo Santabarbara, or in any of my social media platforms. Thank you, and join us again here soon.